Boys and girls, we're here at the Darin Lankford Fishing Compound, and he's about to share some details with us on what he's catching all these big old bass, what he's hoping to be able to bring home $50,000+ here in the next week on. He's digging through the arsenal back here, but if you're watching this is going to be exclusively on TrumanLakeFishingIntel.com, so head over there to the website. He's going to be breaking down some of his favorite baits, talking about some of the latest patterns leading up to this next weekend, which is September 17th, 18th, 19th time frame. Tons of bass tournaments going on this coming weekend, and this is going to be great stuff for those bass fishermen out there to be watching this from one of the long-time Truman Lake extremely high performers who won a lot of tournaments, Darin Lankford. So stay tuned for that, and we're going to get into the video.
Hey, this is Darin Lankford, and I've got some baits here and some rods here. I was going to share a few tricks that I do and the way I do setups for late summer, early fall fishing. And some of this stuff works great right at this time, and then it kind of changes here and there as the temperatures cool off. You start getting some cooler nights. But right now, Truman is kind of on fire. Has been for a month or two. It's been really good. There's a lot of people fishing. There's a lot of pressure out there right now. We got the Toyota series getting ready to start this next week. There's a couple charity tournaments also this next week. So the lake's going to be busy this weekend. I believe the Toyota series starts actually on Thursday's first day of competition. So there's going to be 140-ish boats in that, 75 boats in another tournament, and another tournament at a long show is going to have 25 to 30. So it's going to be a busy lake. But there's still plenty of fish. You just got to jump in there and fish. Don't look up, just fish. One of my go-to baits, which has been just a good old bait on Truman Lake, always has been, is the big old 10-inch red shad worm. There's nothing special about this. It's a 5/0 hook with a 7/16 weight or a 5/16 weight, depending on how deep and what kind of current. I throw black weights. That you don't have to. I just throw black weights. That's just something I like to do. And I've got the bobber stop, little black bobber stop there. That's the. We used to peg this weight. Now we use bobber stops, which are really nice. I throw this bait on 25-pound test. And when I set the hook, I want them coming my way. This is just a culprit worm, made by Culprit, red shad. Now I use culprit when it's sunny. Now when it turns cloudy, I'll change to zoom. It's just a little duller finish. The culprit's got a real flashy tail, so it works well when it's sunny. Basically, you just flip it out there past the tree and just kind of let it free fall. Just picture it free falling to the bottom, work it a few times and pick it up and flip it to the next tree. You're kind of fishing points. Right now, everything's pretty well point related. Not so much current because they're not pulling a lot of water. They're just on the points. You see shad, there's a bass there, I promise you. With live scope, you can see them. Another worm that a lot of guys throw is the big trick worm. We used to throw these trick worms on our shaky heads. Well, now they've made the Magnum trick worm. It's great big. It's a big 10-inch worm. They'll flip this the same way. They'll throw it on a jig head, just a big jig head, or they'll rig it, Texas rig, the same way. It's a do-nothing worm with no tail. I mean, it basically just stands up on the bottom, where this has got a ribbon tail where it swims down. So kind of whatever your preference is. My preference right now is this worm, but I know a lot of guys are throwing this trick worm also. That's been the hot bait right now. I mean, everybody's fishing a worm and they're catching them on a worm. There's nothing special to it. Just flip and flip and flip. Some other things. This is the zoom worm that I throw when it's more cloudy. Or I'll throw this early in the morning. When the sun gets up, I throw a culprit. That's my personal opinion. You can throw this all day. You can throw this all day. it just breaks up the monotony when I switch them back and forth. I think I'm doing something smart. I'm not sure if that's the case. My go-to bait, I just always have it year-round, is a black and blue jig. This particular jig is a 1/2 ounce. It's a swim jig. It's got the bullet head, which makes it a swim jig, so you can kind of swim it or yo-yo it through the trees. It's not like the springtime when you use a flipping head or a stand-up head. You're mimicking bluegill. Bluegill don't set still, as most of you have seen. They kind of just work their way through the trees. This bait will get better as fall gets closer. It'll start taking the place of the worm. This bait will get better. It's not bad now, but it'll get a lot better. Another bait is a good bait this time of year. It's a good time anywhere. Is a pop-R. This is just a regular pop-R. Nothing fancy about it. Straight out of the package. And I get around at shad, especially in the morning. Get around them shad, and I'll pop that thing around, and that little bait catches a lot of big fish for you. You just gotta throw it and be confident. And it's not really a bait you throw all day. I don't, but I'll have it out and throw it some. It kind of dies off as fall gets here for me, and when it does, I switch to a bigger bait, and I'll go to the plopper. This is the plopper. They have several different kinds now. This is actually a plopper, but they've got I forgot what all of them's called now, but you can get all kinds of different baits that have the same action. But just something shad colored. This isn't too much shad colored, but it's just what I had tied on. This time of year, you just want to try to mimic shad color, because that's what they're doing. You'll see them busting shad and all that. So plopper, them are good baits all day. You want to have one of them on your deck. That way, if you're fishing along and you see one blow up on shad, you can pick it up and fire it over real quick. A lot of times he'll trigger that. That'll trigger the bite more than something else will. Still catching fish on the football head jig, which is usually pretty late in the year right now for this, but it's kind of a year-round bait anymore too. I mean, you see them on BASS fishing these year-round anymore. So we used to just fish this bait in June when they were pulling current. Now we pretty well fish it year-round. Just kind of swimming along the bottom, stays in contact. That's why there's no paint left on the head. You just keep it crawling across the rocks. It mimics crawfish. That's what you're doing with it. But always in bottom contact with that bait. Then the baits that I'm well known for, probably I hang my hat on, that's got most of my plaques and wins and everything, are right here. These are square bills. This is the like a DB3. These are handmade. Certain people make these. David Ryan's Black Market Balsas. This is not one of his baits. This is made by another guy that really doesn't want his name out. He don't make them. You kind of got to just see him one day and one sitting in his cup holder, you steal it. And then tell him later on you stole it. And he's all right with it. But these are really good baits. David's baits are really good. Matter of fact, I just picked up 6 baits from David yesterday. And I had him make me something a little more shad colored. Oh, Tyler, I got unhooked my rod thing there.
That's my fault.
You done strapped me down.
I strapped you down.
So this is one bait I got from David. This is his little bait. I think he calls it his small, but it's basically a B1. It's a little bitty. The reason I like David's little bait is you can run the bigger hooks. Most little baits like this, you got to run the size smaller hooks, which makes you lose a lot of fish. This bait's just big enough, it'll handle these bigger hooks, so you don't lose so many fish. I've got a bait in here that I bought from David about 6-7 years ago, and most of the wood is gone from here back. I can't tell you how many fish I've caught off that bait, but they have actually took all the wood off the back for the most part. It don't work no more. I've got to get it rebuilt, or just it's junk. But I mean, I've had it for 10 years. I can't tell you how many fish I've caught off of it. This is a great shad color bait, and you basically burn these. A lot of guys don't understand these baits. You don't just throw them out and reel them in. You burn them. Point your rod at the bait. Don't hold it up. Don't hold it sideways like you hold some of your deeper baits. Hold your rod right at it. 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever you want to call it. Directly at it and wind it. That'll let that bait work like it's supposed to. You want that bait erratic. David's little baits, this little bait right here, he told me run awful good. And I put some hooks on it yesterday and threw it for the first time yesterday, and wow. It flat gets after it. That bait right there, I guarantee, is going to do it for me. So that's really all you need this time of year. There's tons and tons and tons of baits out there. There's guys throwing swim baits. There's guys throwing spinner baits. Spinner baits are good bait, especially if it's cloudy, early in the morning. Throw white because the fish are really keying on shad, just to tan them. This is not really the time of year to go to big blade. I wait for big blades till we're in the fall. When we get to the fall, then I'll change to a bigger bladed bait. But right now, this is the bait I'll throw. And these are just War Eagle. They make War Eagle baits at Everhart's. You can get them at Everhart's. There's several different kinds. You don't have to throw War Eagle, but that's just the one I like to throw. Basically, on Truman Lake, just throw big line. Line's not too important on Truman because it's so dirty. Now, if you get to your deeper diving crankbaits and stuff, you might drop down. Or springtime, you might drop down throwing jerk baits, and that drop down to 10, 12 pound test, 15 pound. But everything you see here has got 20 or 25 pound test on it. I don't mess around with them. I set the hook and get their head up and bring them to the boat. Even these crankbaits, 20 pound test. They're square bills. They're designed to go in the brush. You want to hit the tree. Don't just reel it out in the open. Put it in the brush. And hold that rod straight and reel it, and it'll come right through it. You hit something, stop, and take off real fast again, and that's when you're going to trigger that strike. This is what I'd throw, and you throw these baits, you'll catch them on this lake right now. You'll catch them for the next month on these baits. There will be a buzzbait bite, especially if it's cloudy. You can catch them on buzzbaits, spooks, anything, but everything's going to change to white here as fall comes. You want to change your swim jig. Will want to switch to white. Chatterbaits, spinner baits to white. Your crankbaits want to go white. You want to change probably from balsa crankbaits to plastics as the water cools. When we start getting them cooler nights and the water temperature starts falling, balsas won't be as good as a plastic. Don't ask me why, but they just won't. You'll have to change to like the little RC 1.5 or something like that. RC 1.5 is a great bait. So that's all I got for you, Tyler. Did I miss anything?
No, I think so. I was going to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So you talk about as fall gets here. We're here in early to mid-September. When you say when fall gets here, is that October? Is that when water temps are hitting 60s, 70s? What is that to you when the true fall is here?
Well, when I start seeing the water temperature get down there in the low 70s, mid to low 70s, and maintaining that, that's when I start seeing fall. It's usually October, late October. We're going to get into these, they call it the dog days. October can be extremely tough fishing. Late September and October can get really tough. I don't. It's just they do. It does on all lakes. This Toyota series this weekend. I mean, it might only take 14 pounds a day to get to qualify for the last day, and I mean it might take 24 pounds because we're running a little behind. The lake is running a little behind compared to what it usually is. I fished a crappie tournament today, and the crappie have not, they're still in their summer haunts. They have not started up them ditches yet. And with the lake low, we're not used to the lake being this low. It's kind of got things messed up a little bit. It's got the fish messed up. It's got us messed up. We're used to fishing flats. There isn't too many flats right now. The water's low enough. Most of your flats don't have a flat spot anymore. It just drops off into the channel. So we're fishing a little deeper. So some of this stuff isn't working as good as it used to. Square bills aren't working as good as they should. They'll still bite it, but they just don't have that flat. And we're going to get a bunch of rain tonight, so no telling what it's going to do. I mean, right before the tournament, that's perfect. It probably mudded up and everything else, but that's all right. We need the rain. Let it come. So wintertime to me, we need to get to the low 70s and start having them cool nights where it's, in the 50s at night and, gets up to the 70s during the day.
So you just went through all of your favorite baits coming up for the fall. If you had to pick just one of them that you were going to be throwing for the month, which one do you think it would be?
For this month?
Yeah, into October.
If I had to pick, well, boy, that'd be hard. It'd probably be the jig.
Okay.
The jig's just so versatile. You can flip it to the bottom. You can flip it anywhere. You can swim it. You can yo-yo it. You can burn it. You get down, and there'll be a time in October for about 2 weeks. You just cast this thing out like a spinnerbait and just burn it. And them tails going like that, and then bass will just annihilate it. You see it. There'll be tournaments won at Lake the Ozarks burning it beside the docks. You do the same thing here, burning it by the trees. So I'd probably, if I had to pick one bait to throw, it'd be the jig, just because you can do so many things with the jig. And it's a big fish bait. You won't get as many bites, but boy, when you get one, it's usually a good one.
Yep. So a couple of predictions for this coming week. I know you said, it's kind of could go one way or the other. Maybe it only takes 14 pounds the first couple days. I mean, what do you really think it's going to take? What do you think the 3-day wait's going to be if you were to just take a shot in the dark on how much wins this Toyota Series coming up?
I think 42 pounds is going to win it. I think a lot of guys are thinking 50 or 47. If there was no other tournaments on the lake, but with this water being low, it's taking the upper ends of the lakes out. So we're all going to be pushing in that lower end. So it's going to get it really crowded and really pressured, and it's going to get tough. Just from what I've seen practicing, 14, 15 pounds a day you're going to be right there. I think there'll be a lot of guys with 14 pounds the first day, and then you'll see a major drop off the second day, because not because the guys are bad fishermen. It's because there's going to be 3 times as many people on the lake come Friday, and then Saturday you get to championship day. Who knows? You might go to every one of your spots and there'll be 2 boats on it already. It's going to be one thing I've done this week. Is I have not fished any place I normally fish. Not one. I have went for 3 days and actually just went to places I never fish and looked around and tried to find new spots and new places. Truman's not like other lakes where you can pattern them. Like you go to Lake the Ozarks, they might be in that 3 foot of water on that float, or a walkway, or the back of the dock, and you can go and pattern that. Truman's not that way this time of year. It's really hard to pattern. You might find a bait they'll bite, but you might catch one in a foot of water, and you might catch one in 20 foot of water. You just got to go fishing. You try to make as many casts as you possibly can, and don't get excited. Don't get in a hurry. Just don't look at other boats. Just go fishing and enjoy it.
There's going to be a lot of boats in this Toyota series. You think it's going to be a local that wins it, or one of the pros that comes in and pulls it off?
There'll be one local, I think, that wins it. And then I think after that, these guys coming in here, they're not just Joe Blow. I mean, these guys, most of these guys, probably 50% of the field here does it for a living. I mean, they're not coming here to donate $2,000. They're coming here to take home that check. And I think a local win it, but when I say a local, I'm looking at Casey Scanlon. Casey Scanlon he's a local. He's got a wealth of knowledge on this lake. He does it for a living. And I fished against Casey a lot. And, you know, he was always all right, a good fisherman. He wasn't bad ever. But now that he does it full time, he's really gotten really good. So when I say a local, it could be a touring pro too. I mean, Casey's going to be tough in this tournament, I think. That's who I think is going to be tough. He's so versatile. He might shake his head. He knows all about all these baits. He knows how to fish them, and he knows them spots. I found some spots where I usually fish. I found stumps that I didn't know was there. I've been fishing for 20 years and didn't know a stump was there. And I just lucked in, found it, threw a bait out in the middle of the lake to get my line tightened back up and hit something, and caught a 5-pounder in practice. I was like, what in the world? And then so I got to looking, I found a stump about this big sitting out there. I had no idea it was there. And I went back in a tournament already and caught a 3.5-pounder off that stump. But some of my other good spots are up on the dry bank. So a lot of us locals are having to adjust to this low water. We're not used to this, so it's a new thing for us. But the lower end has been on fire, and that's where most of these guys will fish. They're clear water type guys. They're deep guys, and with electronics nowadays, there's been a lot of brush sunk, and they'll fish them brush piles till they're just blue in the face. So they'll have a day. There'll be one of them catch them one day, and the next day there'll be somebody come from the bottom up. But it's going to be that guy that can be consistent. It's always been that way on Truman. If he can, that guy that can catch that 15 pounds and just get above that 14 mark, if he can do that 2 days, he'll do it. He'll be the one that'll be in contention to win.
So, kind of bass related, kind of not. Is this going to be a weekend where some of those bonus hybrids start popping up, hammering up shallow, or are we still a little soon?
We're a little early for that, but I went out today in that crappie tournament. I kind of got bored because the water being down, the carp are just piled in them bends, them channel swings where the crappie are at. So the crappie are really hard to see with the carp there. So I went over to another flat point, and it was loaded with 3-pound and 4-pound hybrids. Every tree had one on it. And I just live scoped them with my 12-foot rod. And I probably caught 30, and I guarantee you could have sat there and caught 100. It was every tree had one on it. They're so aggressive. I should have had, if I didn't have this tournament, I'd have you come out and we'd film that, because I mean, you'd take a kid out there right now and they would just absolutely have a heyday. But no, it's a little early. They'll start, give them 2 or 3 more weeks, I think, before they start rearing their ugly head. And they hit these baits here and they absolutely destroy them. And 15-pounders left and right.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Talking about that here in a few weeks. But first things first, is you got to bring home the W here this next weekend.
Well, that'd be nice.
So, well, we appreciate it a ton, Darin. Thanks for sharing. I know everyone else is going to appreciate the insight and the tips, and we'll be looking forward to tracking you on the tournament this weekend and seeing how it's going.
There'll be a lot of running around. Me and my Mercury, we're going to be getting along this weekend. We're going to be burning up well, not the pavement, we'll be burning up the water. So up and down and all around. So it ought to be fun.
Well, good luck and thanks a bunch, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.